Hey, and welcome back to Wheat Beat. My name is Mike. And if you're following along on this YouTube channel, you probably know I am building a commercial bakery right inside my house. Not this house, actually. This house is a temporary house that I'm staying in while the new house is under construction. But what if you want to bake something really nice? Let's say pizza, which is what my family asked me to make. And I don't have a special mixer, and I don't have a special oven, and I don't have any really special ingredients. Well, what do you do then? You can make a totally awesome, authentic pizza, even in the most simple, humble kitchens that almost everybody has in the United States. So follow me along today as we make a wonderful pizza with no special equipment and no special ingredients. Okay, welcome back. So today we are going to make some awesome pizza. Now I sort of promised you there'd be no special ingredients, and there really isn't any. The only one that maybe is not in your pantry is Vital Wheat Gluten. It's just gluten protein. It's actually not a big deal. Every single supermarket has it. If you don't already have gluten in your pantry, go out and get some, because you can follow my blog and see I have a calculator for how you can use Vital Wheat Gluten to strengthen weak flours that you might have, like all-purpose flour, which you want to make stronger. Stronger means that it has a higher gluten level. More gluten means that it's stronger when you tug on it. It's a little chewier when you eat it. It tends to rise a little bit more and trap more gases. So gluten is really wonderful, and if you continue following this channel, I'm going to show you how to include gluten in a lot of your recipes. I know gluten right now is just kind of this evil ingredient that nobody wants to have. Everything's gluten-free. Well, you've come to the wrong channel if you want gluten-free. There's no gluten-free here, there's extra gluten. So other than the Vital Wheat gluten, there's really nothing else fancy here. The other disclaimer, I promised you this would be really simple because there's no special mixer and equipment, and that's kind of true because there really is no mixer needed for this recipe, but I sort of misled you if I got you to believe that this is going to be really quick and easy. This is not quick and easy because you still have to do manipulations to strengthen your dough so that you can get a proper pizza out of this basically at the end. So it does take a little bit of patience, but you can get it all done in a day, and almost all of the time that is spent is not actually doing real work. It's just waiting for things to happen. So you're kind of messing around with this a little bit during the day, but there's not like active work all throughout the day. So I don't want to make it sound too intimidating, but it's also not without a little bit of work. But hey, good things come to those who wait. So let's get started and make some pizza. So the first thing we're going to do to get a really delicious aromatic pizza dough is to use what's called a poolish. Poolish is also known as a pre-ferment. Pre-ferment is just something that you make before your final dough. And you must be thinking, well, what in the world am I going to do that for? I'll just mix in all my yeast and water and flour all together at once and get my pizza dough ready in like a half an hour or an hour. Well, the problem with that is that yeast takes a long time in order to develop flavors and smells that it can basically reach its full potential. It takes a long time, not 45 minutes, not an hour, but many hours. So we incorporate pre-ferments into our doughs so that we get the benefit of a lot of flavor and aroma, but also without dumping a ton of yeast into your dough all at once. If you dump a lot of that yeast all at once into your dough, you're going to get tons and tons of bubbles, basically gases rising. You're going to get this big fluffy ball of dough, which is great if you want a fluffy like loaf of bread or something like that. But if you want to have it be nice and fluffy, but you also want the aroma and the flavors that can potentially come out of that flour, you need to draw out that fermentation as long as possible. So we first do a pre-ferment a long time with a little bit of yeast to really get that going, and then we mix that into our flour and water later with all of the yeast that's going to give us the expansion. So we get the expansion, but we also get the flavor and aroma. And that is really the idea behind pre-ferments. And we're going to implement that in this pizza dough. And by the way, we are making two 14-inch pizzas, so the equivalent of like two large pizzas. So obviously you can cut this in half very easily. You can double it if you want to make more, or whatever it is you want to do. So I'm going to take 350 grams of water, and I'm going to put in a very small amount of yeast. In this case, just a 1/4 teaspoon of yeast. I'm going to kind of let that dissolve just briefly, like 20 seconds. It doesn't have to sit and really bloom or anything like that. And then once that's mixed in there, I'm going to go ahead and add the exact same amount of flour, 350 grams of flour. Now this is where vital wheat gluten comes in. The flour you have in your pantry is most likely all-purpose flour, and that is generally around 10.5% gluten. That means that around 10 or 10.5% of your flour weight actually consists of gluten protein. So gluten is a very important thing, and with pizza dough, we generally like it to be a little higher, like around 14% or even higher than that. So rather than go out and buy pizza flour, which naturally has a higher gluten level, I am going to fortify my relatively weak 10% all-purpose flour to be something stronger. And this works really well. Check out the link up above if you want to go see the blog post on this on my webpage, and see a calculator that I've created there that will give you the ability to fortify any flour you want to any percentage you want. So in this case, we are assuming we're working with a 10.5% gluten flour, which is generally all-purpose flour. And I am going to use this vital wheat gluten, punch this into the calculator. Again, go to the link, I'll leave it there in the section below there, and see how to calculate it. So let's just go with what I have, because that's what most people have. I am going to add 350 grams of flour to my poolish, except I want it to be, in this case, a little bit stronger. I'm going to actually make it 11.5%, not 10.5%. I'm going to add 345 grams of all-purpose flour, and I'm going to add 5 grams of vital wheat gluten for a total of 350 grams of flour to 350 grams of water and a 1/4 teaspoon of yeast. I'm going to mix it all together, and then I am going to cover it with some plastic, and I'm going to rest it somewhere relatively warm from now until I'm ready to start my pizza. Now, I've started my day at 7 a.m. and I plan to start mixing my pizza dough at 3 p.m. You can obviously alter it, but the way I've done this is so that if I start at 7 a.m. with this poolish, my pizza is out of the oven at 6 p.m., so 11 hours later. So you can obviously alter this any way you want. And by the way, if you use the poolish a little too early, nothing bad's gonna happen. Your pizza's still gonna taste great. And in fact, if you start this poolish the night before, it might even be better, and then you put it in the refrigerator. There's all sorts of ways to do this, honestly, you guys, but I'm just trying to keep it as simple as possible, but get the maximum that I can get out of the flour without working too hard, multiple days to try to get my dough to be perfection. So I like to get everything done in one day. So if my family says we want pizza today, I know I'm just going to create some poolish in the morning, and by night we're going to have a great pizza. So I have started at 7 a.m. The poolish has been sitting out there. Take a look at this poolish. It is nice and bubbly and ready to go. And we do like to see lots of tiny little bubbles in there, and maybe even some wrinkles in the top parts of the dough to know that it's starting to even collapse on itself a little bit. That's how we know that the poolish is ready. So our ingredients are pretty simple. We have the poolish, we have some yeast here, we have some water, we have some olive oil here, and we have some flour. This is just an all-purpose 10.5% protein flour. We have some regular sea salt there. And then, of course, we have the vital wheat gluten, which we already talked about. So I am going to mix everything together in this bowl. I'm going to start with the water. And in this case, we have 100 grams of water, and we're going to add into that the poolish. But before we do that, we're going to add 15 grams of instant yeast. 680 grams of poolish. Now, you're going to really need like a silicone spatula, because you're going to use almost every bit of this poolish, and so you don't want to like waste any, basically. I'm going to add the oil. In this case, it's 23 grams of oil. And then we're going to add 15 grams of salt. I'm then going to add the vital wheat gluten. And for this recipe, again, I'm assuming that we want to raise our protein level to something more in the 14% range. And so I've already done the calculations for you, but feel free to modify that if you need to. It's very simple. And if you make a comment down below, I promise to answer you if you have questions or you're not sure how to use that calculator. In this case, I am putting in 34 grams of vital wheat gluten, and then I'm putting in 286 grams of all-purpose flour. Now notice I am working in grams. A lot of people are like, oh, what is it in cups? What is it in ounces? Honestly, folks, if you want to do baking on a little bit higher level, I strongly recommend you get a simple digital scale. I think they cost like $15 on Amazon. They're not very expensive. And your baking will be elevated like infinitely better than what it is you're doing now, because you're going to be able to be so consistent. As you've probably seen on many YouTube channels, a cup of flour can vary in weight very drastically if it's packed, if it's fluffy, if you've kind of straightened off the top. I mean, there's so many variables to weight when it comes to these dry ingredients that I strongly recommend that you go in grams, and that's why I'm only talking in grams. Okay, so we've added the all-purpose flour, and then I am just going to take a big spoon and I'm just going to start mixing this around until all the dry bits are basically moist. I'm not trying to get a perfect mix here. I'm just trying to get everything wet. Now, once I've done this, as you can see, it's basically just like a globular mass. It's kind of, nothing's really homogenized here. It's basically just a clumpy, wet mess. And that is fine at this stage. In fact, I'm just gonna clean off the spoon, and then I'm gonna cover it with plastic, and we're just gonna start a timer. Now, at this point, you're gonna see in the recipe that I have a timeline here. Basically, we are going to do folding of this dough and certain increments, and that is going to develop this dough just like a mixer would. Okay, so we've mixed everything together now, and we've started a timer, because in 5 minutes, I'm gonna come back and do what's called a fold. So what is a fold? A fold is basically taking your massive dough, like this is massive dough, and we're gonna try to like stretch it into something that looks more like a square. And then what we're gonna do is we're going to try to stretch it and fold it in half like this. And then we're gonna rotate it 90 degrees and we're gonna fold it in half again. And then we're gonna rotate it 90 degrees and fold it, rotate and fold it, just like that. And then we're gonna end up kind of balling it up again and putting it back in the bowl. Every time I tell you in here we need to do a fold, all we've done is stretch this out, stretch out your ball of dough, and then we're gonna fold it on itself 4 times like I showed you before. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, kind of roll it into a ball, put it back in the bowl. And the reason I have it written in the recipe as 0, 5, 15, 25, and all of those increments is because for me, I'm maybe not the best multitasker. It's easier for me to just turn on a timer, and I know that when it says 5 minutes, I need to come back and do a fold. When it says 15 minutes, I need to come back and do a fold. Otherwise, if I have to keep restarting the timer, I won't know, am I on the second one or the third one? It just gets too confusing for me, and I'm just not that smart, I guess. So this is my way of making life easier, and that's why I've written it that way in the recipe. So here we are after 5 minutes, and now we are going to do one of those folds I showed you before. Here we are now at 15 minutes, and now we are going to do another fold. Here we are at 25 minutes, and now we're going to do another fold. Notice how The ball of dough is starting to get a little more stiff now. It's starting to get more even. When I try to stretch it out into that square piece, it's not doing it as easily as before because the gluten is starting to develop here a little bit. Here we are at 35 minutes, and again, it's looking a little better each time. We're starting to get a little more bubbles showing inside as the dough is fermenting. Now we've waited 20 minutes and we're doing our fold at the 55-minute mark. So it's been almost an hour since we originally mixed our dough together, and as you can see, it's starting to look quite even. The dough's a lot more smooth, a lot more even, there's more bubbles. It's looking pretty good, but we're gonna give it one more fold in another 20 minutes. So now we're at an hour and 15 minutes, and now we're gonna do our final fold. And now we're gonna put it back in the bowl and we're gonna give it 30 minutes of what we'll just call bulk fermentation. We're just letting the yeast do its thing, but we've really developed the dough at this point to a level that is acceptable for pizza dough. Okay, so now we are going to divide the dough into two pieces. And so the way I do it is I just take the bowl, I take out the ball of dough, I re-tare the scale, and now I put the ball of dough back in, and that way I've basically just measured how much dough total I have. I cut that in half, and then I know exactly how much to weigh out for two identically sized balls of dough. Okay, so now that we've divided the dough, we just want to create an even ball. And the way that we're gonna do that is a little different than before. Before we stretched it out into a square, and then we folded it in half, and then we folded it in half and in half and in half. Well, in this case, we're gonna do just what we would do a basic shape for a round boule, which is what you would do even for a piece of dough for making a loaf of bread. If you wanted to shape it into a round ball, this is the way you would do it. You would stretch it out into a square, except instead of folding it in half, you would actually fold the edges into the center like this, and the other edge into the center like that, and create this basically long rectangle with the crease in the middle. And then you're gonna rotate it 90 degrees, and you're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna fold the edges into the center like this, and you're gonna end up with a fairly perfect square. Now you can put that seam down on your work surface, and you can kind of tuck in the edges into a ball and sort of roll it and pull and roll and rotate it and pull, rotate and pull, rotate and pull, and so you get a very nice round ball. That does take a little bit of practice. It's not a big deal, and I'll show you how I do it here. But basically what you end up with a nice, tight, firm ball of dough that is then going to sit there for about 15 minutes to relax, because if you try to roll this round piece of dough out with your roller right now, it's just going to be a very tight piece of dough that's not going to stretch easily, and you're just going to fight it the whole way. And you don't want to fight with your pizza. Your pizza is your friend. Don't fight it. So you just want to wait about 15 minutes for the gluten to relax, and then when you come in with your roller, it's going to go out nice and easy. And if at any stage here while you're rolling it out, you're feeling like it's getting tough again and it's getting too hard and you're fighting the dough, stop fighting the dough. Give it some more time. So I usually wait like 2 minutes, let it relax a little bit, and then I come back and I keep rolling, and it's so much easier. Now you'll notice I also don't use any flour on my surface. I'm letting the dough stick directly to the countertop, and that's actually going to make my life easier, because as I stretch it out, it's going to stick to the countertop, and it's going to prevent it from springing back to the center where it started, which is what we call elasticity. And we don't like elasticity when we're trying to roll out dough, and the way we get rid of that is we just give it some time. So we're going to wait 15 minutes, let it relax a little bit, start rolling it out. Now, obviously, you could be like one of those famous, pizza throwing guys that like spin it, all over the place, and it's really fancy and cool. And I'll bet you'll come out with an even better pizza dough than I can do with a rolling pin. But most people don't have the patience, and I'm one of them, to learn how to spin pizza in the air and do all of that. So I just use a rolling pin, which is not perfect, but it's doable. And that's why I do it. So I'm going to roll this out here on the counter, and as you can see, I am rolling from the center out. I'm not rolling across from one end to the other, because when you want to take a ball and roll it into something flat and circular, you want to start in the middle and pull out or push out to the edges. Now, I've gotten most of the way there. This is a little bit short of my 14 inches. I am using this perforated tray. It's supposedly non-stick, but I always spray this first with a little bit of oil, and I sprinkle some semolina flour on it so that I don't have this pizza sticking to it too much. But I place this pizza basically tray over the dough I've rolled out to see if I'm at the right size, and I can see that I'm a little bit short. So I'm actually going to wait 2 minutes while it's just sitting there and further let the dough relax. If you don't fight the dough, if you just keep trying to roll this out, you're just going to be fighting it, and there's no sense in doing that. Just wait 2 minutes, come back to it, and you'll see it's so much easier. Okay, here we are 2 minutes later, and as you can see, I'm rolling it out a little bit more, and it is easier now, and I'm getting it out to the full 14 inches that I want, maybe just slightly beyond that. So now I'm going to transfer this over to my pizza tray. And I actually just stretch it over the edges a little bit, and that way it just kind of holds the edges out as I place this. And there we go. So now I am going to place the tea towels over this to keep it from drying out, and I'm actually going to place this over my preheating oven. So this is a really good time to preheat your oven to the maximum temperature, and in most cases that's 500 degrees. And while that oven's getting warm, you're going to put your pizza dough that's on the trays. I'm going to put it over the oven because it's a cold day in December here. It's going to be like something like 9 degrees tomorrow night or something like that. I don't remember the exact forecast, but it's cold here, and it helps the pizza dough rise a little bit better if it's in a warm place. Preferably around 75 degrees would be ideal. Now I am going to let it sit there for about 45 minutes to an hour. You could even go a little bit longer, but basically the result you're trying to get is that the pizza dough is going to feel a little bit puffy, and you can see that it's risen just a little bit, and it's not just like a flat cracker basically. And that takes generally in a warm kitchen 45 minutes to an hour, maybe even an hour and 15. Okay, so now we spread the pizza sauce, and we're going to put our cheese, and now this is where you can get creative. Now I've pre-cut all of the toppings that I'm going to put on. It's obviously nice if you can do that ahead of time. So I have everything ready to go, but this is your time to shine. You know, you want your pineapple, you want your anchovies, or whatever else weird things, M&Ms, I don't know, whatever you want to stick on your pizza. But I like the traditional stuff, you know, the mushrooms, the onion, the black olives, the fresh tomatoes, pepperoni, of course, basil, anything you want. That's the way I like. I like everything on my pizza, but I do have somebody in my house who doesn't want any pepperoni. So I actually make this pizza customized for that one person who doesn't want pepperoni. Who doesn't want pepperoni? My God. So now it's ready to go, and I'm just going to open the oven and toss it in, and then watch the magic happen. Now we are going to let this bake at 500 degrees for about 17 minutes. That's how it works in my oven. You might have to try yourself and see. Could be 16 minutes, could be 18 minutes, could be 14 minutes. I don't know. I do, by the way, have it on convection. I think that works a lot better for me. And the other thing you'll notice is I have a pizza stone. I love pizza stones. I don't necessarily need it just for pizza. In fact, any loaf of bread that I bake in there, anything that you bake, if there's a stone in your oven, you get a lot better heat retention and you get a lot better bake. And I just leave it in the oven full time. I never take it out of there. It's a worthy investment. I might even leave a link down below if somebody even asks me about where to get a really good stone for your oven. It's custom made for your oven, and it's not even that expensive. Okay, after about halfway through, I am going to rotate this pizza. So let me do a quick rotation so I get a more even bake. Look at this thing. Isn't it gorgeous? By the way, one quick tip I want to mention is don't overload your pizza. A lot of people, they get all these toppings and they just throw everything on there and it becomes like a mountain of toppings. You're not going to get a good result that way. In fact, the fewer the toppings, the better. It gives the dough a chance to rise a little bit and not get too bogged down by all of those toppings. So I definitely recommend you take it easy. That's one of those rookie mistakes where you just put too many toppings. Don't make my mistakes. I learned the hard way. Okay, and now we are ready. In my case, it's been 17 minutes and I think we're good to go. Oh, it's looking gorgeous, gorgeous. Let's take a look here. I'm going to use a spatula to just kind of lift it off the pizza tray. It's actually not hard to get this thing off, but I'm obviously fumbling here a little bit. And let's take a look underneath. Take a look. Very nicely baked. It's nice and brown. It's not, nothing here is burnt. I frankly do not like burnt pizzas. You see these 1,000,000,000 degree oven pizza places that like you basically get like a piece of charcoal with like some pepperoni in the middle, and that's just not me. I like it to be crispy and chewy in the middle and nothing really burnt. That's just the way I like it. So obviously you can tailor this any way you like. But this is to my liking the way it is now, and hopefully it is to yours too. Crispy and soft inside. Nice and fluffy. Very, very yummy. Very, very flavorful. I'm very happy with this. All right, bon appetit. Okay, hopefully you got something out of this video today and you're gonna make some great pizza. And if you do and you like it, you better come back here and subscribe to this channel and comment and like this video, because otherwise I won't know if it was worth my time or not. So that's all for today. And I hope to see you back for another one of my videos. I'm going to try to do more videos of recipes, things like this, as we get further along. But obviously, there's going to be a lot more interesting stuff coming when I finally build that commercial bakery in my home. And that is around the corner. I have to say right now, we are into beginning of January, end of December right now. And I'm hoping that by the end of January, early February, everything will come together and I will have that bakery up and running, and I'll be able to show you some really cool stuff. But until then, go bake something.